Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Rockies Daily. I'm your host, Scott Ayers, where we talk all things Colorado Rockies. Hope you're having a wonderful Friday, and let's jump into things right here. Look, we're in that point of the offseason where it is a bit of idea season as a Colorado Rockies fan. If we're not going to hear rumors, we're going to make up rumors ourselves. And look, I think the idea of the Rockies going after a rotational piece shouldn't be anything that is crazy. It shouldn't be something that feels like it's a fairy tale. And the reason why I'm talking about Patrick Corbin today as a potential target for the Rockies is it's one that could actually make sense. If you look at the rotation right now for the Rockies, there's really only a couple of guys that are solidified. It's something we've talked about. Kyle Freeland, Ryan Feltner, Chase Dollander, three guys, right? And you're going to rotate some of those younger pitching pieces as well in and out. But it's worth looking at someone like Patrick Corbin, who is a little bit older. He's 36 years old. He doesn't have the same stuff that he once had. However, I think signing Corbin to a 1 or 2 year deal as you're figuring out which of these younger assets will actually contribute in the future is something at the very least to consider, if not proceed with. The Rockies are still one of two teams that have yet to sign anyone to a major league contract. And Corbin, if you sign him, he actually, for what it's worth, had the best ERA compared to any of the starting pitchers for the Rockies last year. So you're signing a guy who realistically would probably be a number 2 or number 3 option for the Rockies. I do think Dollander is going to be the number 1 guy here very soon, and we're going to talk about him a little bit later in the show. But for Patrick Corbin, it's an opportunity for him to still prove he has something left in the tank. And if it is something where, hey, maybe you can get some upside out of him, and maybe you flip him in a year or two, or maybe you just keep him to have something solid in this rotation. Just because there's so much up in the air with this lineup from both hitting and pitching. Last episode, we kind of talked about what it would look like to get, the top of the top when it comes to free agent pitching. Patrick Corbin is obviously not that. So he would be much, much more affordable. And that's why we're talking about him. Is that the Rockies are worried about spending money on pitching that won't work. Signing a guy to a 1 or 2 year deal, and a 1 year deal that could be, $10 million, $8 million, right? That isn't crazy, and that isn't something that the Rockies should look away from. If anything, they should heavily consider it. And if it's not Corbin, fine. But find someone more than just John Brebbia, who's going to be in the minors and might not ever get a chance to be called up just because he's really fallen off. At least Corbin actually still had like a 4.4, 4.5 ERA. And so, yeah, it's just frustrating when we're looking at this lineup and this team, and on paper right now, it's just not good. It's just not good. And so, obviously, Patrick Corbin is who we're talking about today, but I think finding any sort of relief when it comes to just a starting pitcher who can give you a bunch of innings and some quality starts as well. And that's, I think, the one risk with Patrick Corbin is we would see how he could handle pitching half of his games at Coors Field. But for someone like that, it would be a cheaper contract. You'd get a guy who's probably top 3 in the rotation. And, if anything, even if he's the 4th or 5th guy, it would just be another at least somewhat quality arm. Something that the Rockies just desperately need. So it's an idea for them to consider. It's an idea to look into. But the moral of the story is there just needs to be starting pitching. And I think that's what we're all asking and hoping for. And some of it will be through obviously the guys that they've drafted and traded for that are in the minors right now. But there does need to be something done in terms of getting some arms that are a little bit better than what we've got. And one of the themes that you kind of read a little online, and Rockies fans seem a bit divided of the offseason, is because this team hasn't made any moves. Some people have said, hey, this new front office needs time. And I think that's a fair assessment. In the same light, though, this team was so bad last year that even with the front office making an assessment, it would be a failure if they don't make any signings of any worth this offseason. When you're a team this bad, I don't think there's that much to assess of, hey, this part of the team needs maybe some fixing. And the Rockies have that everywhere. We ranted about it a lot yesterday, so I'll obviously save some of that rant for today. But I mean, they just need to think about it, about any sort of pitching in that starting rotation. We mentioned Patrick Corbin, but again, just look at some guys that aren't going to be on a minor league contract, but instead, hey, they're hopefully going to provide. And then we move on to someone who would also greatly provide for the Rockies, and that's Bo Bichette. Bo Bichette recently said, hey, you know what? I'm not getting much attention in this market. I'm willing to play second base now. And this obviously piqued my interest. It probably piqued everyone's interest. Pretty much every single team, every single fan of most teams at least raised an eyebrow to something like this, where Bichette's essentially just saying, I'm willing to play anywhere. And he's going to command a much larger contract than the players that we've talked about before today, right? You're looking at a guy who's probably going to want a $150 to $200 million contract. But again, this Rockies team, if you had an infield of Tovar and Bichette, that solidifies things. That is something that could be extremely interesting, especially if you get Bichette on a 5, 6, probably not a 7-year deal, but a 5 or 6 year deal, right? So now you have him locked up as you're building things out. That is something of worth and something to note. And then you would obviously have a lineup that is far more. It's a lot scarier for pitchers to face, because right now there's too many holes on the lineup. This would actually make the top of the lineup like Tovar, Moniak, Bichette, Goodman, Beck, and Doyle. Right, that would be your top 6 in a lineup, and that feels a lot more of a put together lineup than what they have now. And that's just one name, but that is what Bo Bichette would bring, right? Amador is currently the starting second baseman, or the projected starting second baseman. He didn't get a ton of run last year. Hit about 170. He's obviously super young, but that's the problem with this lineup. It's so young. And so bringing in someone like Bichette, who's only 27, 20 years old, so it's not like you're getting a veteran on the tail end of his career. You're getting somebody pretty much in their prime who would be your best hitter and could be a great building block for the Rockies. And so I understand it seems and sounds like a pipe dream, but if the Rockies are willing to spend, maybe pitching can be harder to come by here at Coors Field, but it should be a selling point as well to some of these hitters, that they are going to have some of the best games in their career at Coors Field. So it's obviously kind of that double-edged sword when it comes to pitching and hitting. You obviously have to sell Bichette on, hey, we know we were, one of the worst teams in MLB history last year, but you need to be a Colorado Rocky. Like, that's a hard sales pitch, and I get that, right? Like, there's more at play than just some of the basic negotiations and what you want to spend and all of that. You also have to convince players that you're building something of worth. But signing someone like Bo Bichette could be that domino effect where now maybe more guys want to come to Colorado. And that's the thing. If you're afraid to spend money on anyone, then it's going to be hard to attract any type of talent. And if you're just waiting and relying on the young guys to really show more than just a flash, that's obviously a scary way to go about it, especially when you just watch other teams in the league willing to spend money. Obviously, the caveat for the Rockies is, hey, because we were so bad, we know we're probably not going to be competitive next season. Why would we want to spend that kind of money on someone like Bichette? And that then goes back to, hey, that's fair. That's fair that the front office needs to evaluate. And I get that. But if you lock a guy up on a 5 or 6 year deal, that can help at least begin and speed up that process. And the nice thing is you sign someone like Bichette, you're not giving away any assets. You're not really hurting development of some of these other guys. If anything, it should hopefully just help enhance a lineup that desperately needs it. So it'll be interesting, right? The Boston Red Sox have shown maybe interest in Bichette. They've also are the only other team that haven't signed any type of MLB free agent. So we'll see. But Bichette's an interesting name because I think many thought he'd probably have signed by now. And there hasn't been much rumblings of who's going to end up with him. For Colorado, you've got to make the call. Even if he says no, just make the call. And even that, I think, is progress. So let's talk about now Chase Dollander, who had an up and down rookie season, finished with just above a 6 ERA, and he's definitely just your typical Rockies pitcher who had more success on the road than he did at home. Gave up 12 home runs at home, 6 on the road. He had a stretch where he had like a 2.5 ERA on the road and 11 ERA at home. That's just how it can go. And so I don't think there should be much concern after his rookie season. I think there's still some real positives to take away, right? He's got, one of the best velocities for a four-seam fastball. His biggest issue was just finding control with it. And he seemed to have a lot of confidence moving into this offseason to work on that control, especially control at Coors Field. And that is something that probably messes with the psyche of a lot of pitchers, especially probably Rockies pitchers, is, all right, I know my slider's not going to have the same kind of movement. I know movement with a lot of my pitches is probably going to be a lot different. And so for him, I think this offseason is really going to be figuring out how he can get that control under wraps. But if you look at really any of his comments in the offseason or when, the Rocky season finished, a ton of confidence with this guy. And that is exactly what you need, especially after the year the Rockies had. It could be really easy for any player to just have no confidence, no expectations. But for him, he wants to be the best pitcher in baseball. And that is the kind of dog mentality that can help solidify and change a culture, right? That can have a positive effect on other guys in the rotation and other guys in the lineup. And that is exactly what the Rockies need. So for him, it is going to be all about control in 2026 because he's got some real nasty stuff. And if he can figure out that control, if he can have, a successful slider at Coors Field, which can be really hard to do, sky is the limit still for him. And I fully believe, he's the best pitcher in this rotation, even if he didn't show up fully in 25. I bet by 2027, 2028, he's going to be the opening day starter for the Rockies. And that's exciting, but 2026 needs to be a year where we see some awesome improvement, because he obviously has it in him, right? He does have that kind of potential and ceiling, which is exciting for the Rockies. And then finally, let's end this week on a salute. A salute to probably one of the biggest figures in Rockies history, Clint Hurdle. He is going to be returning with the club in 2026. The role has yet to be determined of what that is. And honestly, there isn't much to talk about here other than when he said he was coming back as an advisor and then helped as a hitting coach. And right, he's contributed more to this Rockies franchise than just about anyone. And we'll see what this role is. I seriously commend the guy for all the years of pain and torture he's been through, to come back and to endure what he did in 25 of just watching this team play. But he believes in a turnaround, and there is something to be said about that. If Clint Hurdle believes, I believe. And that's all that really matters. We love Clint Hurdle. I don't think there's too many Rockies fans who don't. And man, he's our strongest soldier. And I'll leave it at that. I feel like that's a good note to end on. Clint Hurdle, Rocky's strongest soldier. Put it on a t-shirt or a coffee mug. But until next time, I'm Scott Ayers. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you want more videos like this one. And I hope you have a wonderful day, wonderful weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.